Hey everyone, welcome to Anycast's episode 3, at which we continue working on direct messaging feature, which started in the previous episode. And let's first of all recall what we got so far. We added users to our application, so now only authenticated users could access the chat app. Each message has its author, and by clicking on the author, we can see the profile panel, which contains the message button aimed to start or open the existing private conversation. And that's our starting point for today. We're going to implement this button functionality. What's going to happen when we click on it? Let's take a look at our markup in the Tailwind playground. We can see that we have additional list of channels in the sidebar, which contains usernames. So this is our private conversations, private channels or direct channels. That's what we're gonna build today, this part of the application. How we gonna build private channels? We already have a channel model, which is currently represent public or open channels, so open for everyone. No subscriptions, no ability to leave or join, whatever. And we can reuse the same model to represent private conversations or direct channels. Let's do this by introducing a kind enum column, which gonna describe possible channel types. And we're gonna use the word general for public channels and direct for direct channels. Why general and not public? So the reason is just technical. We cannot use word public without any additional tuning because the word is reserved in active record. So enum micro creates scope automatically for us, and we cannot use public scope, public as a name for the scope. So that's why we use general, like just because we don't want to deal with active record stuff right now. I'm also using string representation of enums, not automatic auto-incremented numeric numbers, because it makes it easier to add new values later. And we'll definitely need some at some point, like private channels or group channels. Let's add this column to our database table. Let's create a migration. So what are we going to write here? Let's use a string column, non-nullable, and with a default value of general. Let's also add an index, because we're going to filter our channels by their kind. So while migration is running, I want to add a quick side note regarding implementing enums in the database. So we're using Postgres right now in our application, and usually, like in production applications, I want to use Postgres built-in enum type support to represent enumerated values. There is a awesome gem by one of my colleagues from Evil Martians called Active Record Postgres enum, which adds support for Postgres types to Active Record in a Rails way, which means that you don't need to switch to structure SQL. You can use schema, RB, and you can use DSL to create types and manage them. It's awesome. Check it, please, and use it in production. But for now, we're going to go with a simple string representation. So, okay, we have this. Now we have two types of channels. I would like to add a method, a class method, find or create direct for. What the method? What is it for? So that's the method which implements the business logic behind the message button. This method should create a new direct channel in case none exists for the specified users. And you see that I'm building initially for as many users as we need. Probably we should just raise argument error. We're going to build for 2 users for now, but we can extend this functionality for 3, 4, whatever we want. And this method should be idempotent. So that means that If the channel for this specified users already exists, we just return this channel. And if it's not, so we build a new one. So it's like create or find by from Rails. We're going to implement it a bit later. Let's add some tests. Let's create a test file. We don't have a test file for model yet. We haven't covered tests yet in this screencast. That's going to be a special episode dedicated to it someday later. So this is a model spec. And let's add some specification for this method. First scenario, it creates a new direct channel if none exists. And the second scenario, when channel already exists, it returns the existing channel. So this is our spec. We can even run it. It says it's pending because no examples specified. We need to write some tests. So what's going to be here? So let's define users. We're using factory bot, create pair user, and let's define a subject, which we test like the execution of our method. And let's add a simple test, subject to change channel direct count by 1. Here we're gonna pre-build this channel. Let's use channel factory and add a trait direct. And here we expect subject not to change channel count. Notice that we do not use the scope here because we test that neither channel is created during the execution of this action. So direct, non-direct, whatever could happen here, we should catch this. And also let's check that subject is the same channel we created. Now we need to implement this. Let's think about how to implement direct channels. Let's try to draw some diagrams, say UML diagrams of our entities and relations. So we have channels, we have users, and to implement direct channels or private conversations, we need to connect channels to users somehow. And we can use an intermediate model for that. So let's call it channel membership. And this channel membership defined, so the membership of a user in a particular channel. Let's create this model. Let's generate model channel membership. So we have a migration. And so what we're going to do here belongs to user and belongs to channel. And also we want to make sure that for every pair of channel and user, the record is unique. Unique true. Let's run it. Now what we can do here. So now channel has many channel memberships. And it has many members through memberships. If we open channel membership class, so we can add associations here as well, and belongs to channel. And now let's open our user class and also add as many channel memberships and has many direct channels. Let's also add a scope here to make sure that only direct channels are returned. Okay, we'll build our associations, our intermediate joint model. Let's extend our test by adding additional checks. So we want to make sure that users first, direct channels count is also changed by 1, and users last, direct channels count is changed by 1 too. So we want to make sure that the channel is created and it's created for the specified users, right? Also here, let's also rewrite our check to make sure that we do not create any additional memberships. Now we need also this to implement this trait for our factory. Let's do that. So trait do okay kind direct. And I think that's it, because we pass members here, and that should automatically be picked up by the active record. Let's try to run our test again, see what's going to happen here. Okay, we fail because we haven't implemented anything yet. So let's go and implement this method in our model. So what are we going to do here? We can use create or find by what? Oh, that's a good question. So we need to enforce uniqueness here somehow, but currently, if we take a look at our schema RB and take a look at the channels table, we do not have any unique constraints here. We do not have any identifier which would allow us to check for uniqueness to avoid race condition during direct messages creation. So we cannot really use create or find by because it relies on unique constraints. And we need to add one. So what I suggest is to add a unique constraint on name, and which makes sense, right? Even for public channels. And generate some kind of computed names for direct channels. So let's start with adding a constraint here. Let's generate a migration again. First, we want to make it non-nullable. Secondly, we want to add an index. Next step is to come up with some name for our direct channel. And we can use user IDs for that. We cannot use user names because user can change their name. So let's use IDs. Let's create a separate helper method here. Direct channel name for users. And that's going to be something like, okay, users map ID sort to ensure the determinism of this value. And then let's, again, map join underscore. And I suggest also adding some kind of unique prefix for this. Say this. Okay, that's probably not so readable. Let's just use a concatenation here. And here we're gonna use this method. And here we create the channel, direct create or find by. What's left here? We also need to create memberships. For that, we can use create with method here, which tells active record to use additional attributes, and we can use members association here if we want to create the record. So let's see if that helps. Cool. So we finished the implementation of the underlying method for building, for starting a private conversation, for creating a private channel. Now let's add private channels to our application. So while our server is starting, let's take a look at our channels controller. We need to add some changes here. First of all, we no longer use all here, but general. And we need to create some private channel. Let's change our seeds. Let's create one more user, David. So Alice and David gonna have a private conversation. Let's rerun our seeds. Cool. Now we can log in as Alice, I think, and see whether we have this conversation. Of course we don't, because we haven't implemented the markup yet. So let's do that. So it's channels index HTML, and here we're gonna have additional div with ID directs. So we have this red line first of all, and then we need direct channels. So, and let's open our user model and add a default order to the direct channels associations. Order created at desk. So the most recently created channel should be the first one in the list. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, it seems to work. So we have everything working here, but the name is cryptic, and what we want to see here is the name of the person we talking to within this private conversation. So let's go to our channel and replace this code with a helper, channel name. And let's open our channels helper and implement this method, channel name. Okay, channel. So return channel name unless channel direct. And for direct channel, what we want here is channel members without current user. That's a very convenient method on arrays added in active support. So we can chain it with other methods. And I'm going to map it like this. So name and join with the comma in case we gonna build direct channels for many users later. So, but for now that should work. It works. So we have David here, and we can send a message. Are you going to RailsConf? Because I plan to, and that would be great to meet you there. What's left? Well, actually, the most important piece that's left is this. We still cannot click on this button and open this private conversation or create a new one. And for that, I suggest creating a new controller. Let's call it channels direct controller. I prefer to use namespace in here. Let's go to the roles first of all. Okay, I want to create a namespace. The only resource there, directs. And let's open this controller and implement this action. Create. What we want here. We need somehow another user. So the one we want to create a channel for, a private conversation for. Let's go user params user ID. And then we create a channel. Channel, find or create direct for current user and another user. And then we just redirect to this channel. That's pretty much it. We'll need to implement our form. And this is our profile template. Let's use a form tag here. Form tag, and that's gonna be channels directs path method post to, and let's add a hidden input field, user ID. So that's how we pass the desired user ID to the controller. And finally, button tag class. Let's see. So let's try to open this page again, and it didn't work. Why? Let's take a look at the console. Network. The redirect is returned, and when we're redirecting, we receive some data, but it seems not to wrapped in the HTML tag, which sounds suspicious. It doesn't look like a real response. If we hit the reload button, we can see that when we load the page, we see the whole HTML element. And even if we redirect here, we also see the whole HTML element. Why the response doesn't contain the whole HTML body when we hit the message button? Why it's just some div, whatever it is, I don't know. Let's take a closer look at our profile partial. And we can see that profile partial is a turbo frame. Okay, I forgot about it. So whenever we submit a form within a turbo frame or navigate a link, the change that occur later, like redirection or reloading or downloading the HTML, so like just processing HTML responses, happens within this frame context. And if the response doesn't contain that does contain some data outside of this frame, it won't be updated. So what we need to do here, we need to tell Turbo to navigate outside of this frame on the form submission. And for that, we need to add a data attribute, Turbo frame, with the value top. So that would indicate that we want to process the whole page after the form submission. So let's check. Okay, we go in page, and yes, you can see that the active channel is now David, and we see the conversation here. So the panel is still open. That's because this element is turbo permanent, as we made it in the end of the previous episode. Cool. It seems that our button works. So we can start a new private conversation. Let's check it one more time with another user. So we have here my user account, and I can start a private conversation with Alice. Hey Alice, how you doing? So that works, nice. But we can see that Alice have no idea that I sent a message. In order to see the update, Alice have to hit the reload button. And now she sees the message, but she wasn't aware of it while I was writing, while I was sending new updates, because the channels list wasn't updated. And that's where our real-time features come into place. So we need to send an update to another user, another party in the conversation, that we actually started talking to them. So let's implement it with turbo streams. What is the event that triggers the start of the conversation? So we do it in the directs controller. Here we go, find or create direct for. We could probably inject some code into this method, but that would be too much responsibility for it and not so Railsy. So hotwire way of doing things is using model callbacks. So this is questionable, but we're going to use it. We're going to follow the classic way. And the model is responsible for starting a private conversation is actually a channel membership model. So here in the after commit, we can send broadcasts, whatever, all the affected parties. So why do we want to broadcast data to all users, even the one who started the conversation? Well, just because the user who started the conversation could also have the application open on other devices, other browsers, other tabs, and we want the UI, the user interface, to be consistent. So that's why we do not care about who was the initiator of this private channel. We send updates to everyone. What kind of update do we want to send? So for now, for the current implementation, since new private conversations appears at the top of the list, we can use broadcast prepend too. What is the stream for this update? And actually the stream is going to be user. User target is directs, channels, channel, and finally locals, channel, and that should be enough. Let's subscribe our users to the personalized streams. So for that, we're gonna use channels index turbo stream from current user. Probably that would make sense to extract this into the application layout later, because we only want to subscribe once to the current user streams, so that the stream that's dedicated to the current user. But for now, let's leave it here, since channels index is more or less is like a layout for our application. We don't have other pages yet. let's try to do that. Let's try to start a new conversation. So in order to make it easier, let me just drop the latest one and create it again. Okay. And let's start a new one. Okay, Alice, I want to message you. Whoa, and we here see the exception. Let's take a closer look at it. An exception comes from cookies, encrypted, concerns, okay, channels helper, channel name. Oh, and here we have current user. And that's a problem because when we invoke this callback, we don't have a current user. So actually the current user for this broadcasting is a user from this channel membership. But we need somehow to pass it to our partial. One way of doing this is to use current attributes and use something like current set user do, and also in our current user method definition add fallback to the current. So this is going to be application controller authenticatable. We can use here current user. So if current is defined, use it. Let's try this actually. And we need to drop it one more time but we don't have current. Let's create a current model. Let's create current user. That's it. Nice. Let's try it one more time. We message Alice, and we see that we, in the context of message Alice. Okay, and here we see that our private channel appeared. That's cool. And now I can say hello. Nice. And that's how we implement this functionality. So using current attributes. I said that's one of the options to use current. Let me in the end tell you about another one. So where is our membership class? Instead of using current, we could also do something like this, which is, I can say this is recommended, but we can try doing this. Here we can use current user, and in our channels helper, you can use something like that. Let's see. Let's try again to drop the channel, switch to another one, and here to another one. Alice, let's message Alice, and that works too. So that's a hack. Even so, current user is a helper, but when we render the partial, it's going to be resolved into the local variable, which we pass directly here. That also could be used to overwrite some helper values in the partials, but that's not really recommended, because if you have some internal partial inside using also some other helpers, you have to pass the current user all the way down, like passing props in React. That's not good. So contexts are better. That's why current works here, and it's a preferable way of doing this. So that's pretty much it for today. We finished working on the direct messaging functionality. It's now, I can't say feature complete, because there are some open questions like whether we should notify about a new channel right after we hit the message button, or should we do that when we say the first message for this private conversation, as most messaging apps do, right? So there are a lot of things we can improve here, but as MVP, this feature is done. So in the next episode, probably next month, we're going to talk about something very different and more action cable and hotwire oriented. Stay safe. Goodbye.